you want to build community, and you want to build the engagement, and you want to build the serendipity that happens at a physical conference into a virtual event.
Today on a special edition of Law Next, I'm going to speak with Jack Newton, co-founder and CEO of practice management company Clio, and Mick Lernout, Clio's vice president of product. We're going to talk about the recent Clio Cloud Conference, the recently published Legal Trends report, some of Clio's recent product news, and what it all tells us about the present and future of law practice and law practice technology. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. ASG Legal Tech offers a suite of software that allows lawyers to automate the management side of their firm so they can focus on their clients and their practice. ASG Legal Tech consists of 4 leading software products: Practice Panther, Bill for Time, Mariscase, and Headnote. And now, on to this week's interview. Jack and Mick, welcome to Law Next.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for inviting us.
Jack, you have now go on record as having been on this podcast almost as many times as I have been. I think I've had you on here at least 4 or 5 times by my count, and that doesn't count all my prior podcasts and whatever else. So,
it's always fun. Glad to be back.
Always fun to talk to you. And unfortunately, we were not able to do this face to face this year, as we did last year in San Diego and many other times as well. But it's still good to talk to you. You did recently, 2 weeks ago, wrap up the Clio Cloud Conference, the first virtual staging of this conference. So now that you had a couple of weeks to decompress, Jack, what was your takeaway from the conference? What did you think? How did it go?
Yeah, the conference was a huge success from my perspective, Bob. It was, in my mind, a big gamble in the sense that, we really weren't sure when we decided to launch a virtual version of the Clio Cloud Conference, whether we would be able to recreate the same kind of success that we'd seen with the physical Clio Cloud Conference over the last 7 years. And there's a lot of challenges to bringing a conference online and making it anything other than a bunch of canned webinars, and I think that's actually a pretty easy thing to do, but you need to ask yourself the question as to why do it in a format other than just a bunch of canned webinars. And the answer, I think, is that you want to build community, and you want to build the engagement, and you want to build the serendipity that happens at a physical conference into a virtual event. So when we designed this conference and we evaluated the platforms that we could hold the conference on, the bar was very much, how can we make this something more than watching a webinar? How can we achieve those other things that a great in-person conference can accomplish? And as you mentioned, with a distance now of 2 weeks and the opportunity to observe maybe the ripples, if you want to think of that, of the conference's message and the connections that it forged among our attendees, and the reflection, that both myself and the attendees of the conference have been able to do over the course of the last 2 weeks. I'm very happy with what we were able to achieve. With 4,500 attendees at the conference, an overwhelmingly positive response, and what I've been able to observe happening online and in the community is that community was indeed forged. And maybe one of the best signals of that for me was, as you know, Bob, there was this boardroom kind of format that the platform afforded, and there was boardrooms continuing to happen even after the closing keynote of the conference. People were so energized that they were kind of sticking a room and not leaving the venue, so to speak. That was exciting to see.
That's great. I didn't realize that. Yeah, this is this capability that the platform had for people to kind of start their own mini get-togethers, conferences, whatever you wanted to call them, and that was a really nice feature. I like that.
That's right. And
yeah. Go ahead.
You were able to see as well, the way that an online conference actually has some opportunities that don't exist with a physical conference. The chat, for example, that can happen concurrently with a session was really neat. And you don't normally see people obviously, chatting directly with one another during a live in-person session. But to see that happening afforded, a new kind of discourse to happen during the conference that you normally wouldn't see at a physical conference. So I think we also discovered some new ways that the virtual world actually has some advantages over a physical conference.
Mick, not to put you on the spot as you sit here next to your CEO, but curious what you thought. I mean, you're somewhat new to Clio in that you joined Clio in February 2019, and you went to the Clio Cloud Conference, the live one in San Diego last year. This was the virtual event. What were your impressions?
Yeah, I think first off, I remember when I first joined Clio, the fact that Clio had this amazing conference that obviously for all of its customers, but also for the legal technology space and the legal space at large was like a big attraction for me. Like it's rare that you have companies that are able to put up conferences this impactful. And so last year in San Diego was incredibly energizing for me and for my entire team. Like we spent all of our time thinking about what our customers and what does the market want, what do they need, what can we do for them, and then to be able to spend a few days just in the middle of that and listening to their stories and learning about them is just incredibly inspiring and energizing. And so I think for me, and I think I speak for some others at Clio as well, I think we're all like excited about throwing an incredible version of Clio Cloud Conference virtually, but also hesitant. Were we going to get that same type of engagement that we had before? And I think that's been probably the most surprising for me is how I think the fact that it was virtual actually allowed us to have this different type of engagement with the users and customers. Like I particularly loved the keynote. So a big fan of Jack's keynote every year. And if you can imagine for me and for us, when we listen to it, we're always wondering what people are thinking when they're sitting in that keynote in the big hall in San Diego and listening to it and what are they thinking. And now we could see it because there was this chat that was happening alongside, and we saw people being excited about what we're announcing and what we're releasing, or have questions around it, and us being able to jump in to respond. And it just felt even more engaging than in some level even more engaging than even in-person conference. So that was really, really, really cool.
Yeah. Obviously, this year's conference was set against. I guess you'd have to call it the theme of the situation that we find ourselves in. And as the conference began, on the first day of the conference, you released the 2020 Legal Trends Report. I've written about that on my blog. The report is available on the Clio site. And Jack, without having to necessarily go too much into the weeds of the report, I wonder if you could kind of summarize what you found in that report and how that kind of set the tone for the conference and the discussions at the conference.
Yeah, there's, as you mentioned, Bob, a really expansive report in the form of the Legal Trends Report that I will do my best to summarize in a concise way. But there's a lot in there this year.
There's a lot in there.
I'll mention the report's available for free. If you search for Legal Trends Report 2020, you will find that as the top search result on Google, and encourage anyone whose curiosity is piqued here to dig deeper into the full-blown report. But I think the overarching theme of the data points we got back from this year's legal trends report is that the legal market is undergoing a tectonic shift, and that COVID-19 and the changes that COVID-19 has catalyzed in the legal industry is driving a huge amount of change in a rapidly compressed time frame. And I've said this several times over the course of the pandemic, but I think every day it's proving to be more and more true, which is we're seeing 10 or more years of digital transformation in the legal industry being compressed into a number of as many weeks. And the legal trends report, I think, has really borne that data point out in terms of both the transformation we've seen on the consumer side and the facility that consumers have with new technologies like video conferencing, and the expectations that consumers have of their service providers, and that's service providers of all flavors, including lawyers. They simply expect an effortless experience and a digital experience, and have overnight preferred accessing most of those services remotely over a technology platform over doing it in person. And this is a really dramatic shift reflected even in our versus our 2019 and 2018 legal trends report data, where consumers indicated that they had a strong preference, for example, for in-person meetings, and lawyers have also seen a similar transformation where back in 2018, 2019, they actually preferred most client interactions would be over a phone call or over an email. And what we've seen is that those interests and those preferences have actually really converged over the course of the pandemic. And both lawyers and consumers are finding each other online, connecting with each other online, conducting business online, meeting with each other over Zoom calls. And the future, I think that many of us saw being, a decade or more off in the distance, all of a sudden is here today. The other data point that this year's legal trends report bears out really fulsomely is that law firms that embrace cloud-based technologies and client-centered technologies are able to drive far greater financial performance from their law firms over the course of the pandemic, and are indeed thriving relative to their peers that are not embracing these technologies. And we saw some law firms, from a revenue performance perspective, pull ahead by as much as 40% per lawyer in revenue performance when they embrace technologies like cloud-based collaboration portals with their clients, technologies like electronic payments, and use these technologies in delivering their legal services. And to me, what this tells us is that cloud-based technologies afford agility, and agility is what is helping separate the law firms that are thriving in this unique environment that we're navigating right now. And more than ever, if I look at the constellation of data points that we got back from this year's legal trends report, to me, the takeaway conclusion is law firms need to be cloud-based and client-centered to thrive in the future. And by cloud-based, I want to emphasize, I don't mean cloud-based in the way we might have meant a decade ago when we talked about simply moving your practice management platform to the cloud. When we talk about cloud-based today, to me, this means moving your entire law firm to the cloud, moving your entire client journey to the cloud, moving client intake and working with your clients, delivery of work product, collecting payment from your clients. That all needs to happen in the cloud. Your work is happening in the cloud. Your team is distributed and collaborating in the cloud. And by client-centered, the second half of that equation, I really mean embracing this this new paradigm for designing and delivering legal services, which is orbiting around the client's needs. And I think that's more relevant today than it's ever been.
Mick, from your perspective, how do the findings that Jack just talked about drive what you're doing in terms of product development at Clio? How do they influence how you're shaping the product experience for customers?
Yeah, I think it's we kind of think about what Jack just described. I think over the last, call it like the first 10 years of Clio, we're very much focused on getting our customers legal practice management into the cloud. And I think one thing that we've realized over these last couple of years, and the legal trends report is one of our biggest drivers of discovering that, is this need of clients, of consumers, and of every aspect of your firm to be in the cloud. And so I think a great example of that is we launched our new client app, Clio for Clients, this year. And that really came from kind of this realization and research over the last couple of years that there is a significant friction point in the way that clients are communicating, or the way that they communicate with their lawyer and their attorney. And there's a lot of friction there. It's an important type of communication. It needs to be secure. So it needs to be frictionless, and it needs to be secure. And it's pivotal for how clients experience that entire relationship that they have with the firm that they work with. And so all of those insights, I think, drive us to create then a product like Clio for Clients, where I think we feel that we have the data, we have the insight, and with the research to be able to make what I think are some pretty bold statements around the way that we believe lawyers should be communicating with their clients, and the way that the clients want to be communicated with, and doing that in a secure and frictionless experience. So I would almost say I think that's probably been the biggest connection point, is if you look at almost everything that we've released over these last, even at this last Clio Cloud conference, you can kind of find it back into this research that we're doing, and this increased understanding that we have of the space, and this evolution that it's going through, this tectonic shift that Jack was talking to. Maybe I'd love to actually maybe throw out one other example, which is always, it's a little bit more, it sounds mundane, but I think it's something that we see in our legal trends report every year, is the importance of electronic billing and payments. And that's been extremely enlightening this year, where it's something we've been talking about for many years, and we believe that, and we know, actually, it's not even a belief, we know that firms that don't just use technology to create bills, but also use technology to collect those bills, to make sure that they share them electronically with their clients, that they take payments through different payment methods. They get better results, they get higher collection rates, and they get better client experiences out of that. And it's been incredible to see it in this year's reports, how actually that behavior, doing those things, using that type of technology, actually creates more successful firms. And I think that's been incredibly validating. But we also know that there's a significant proportion out there of lawyers, even Clio customers, that are not doing that yet. And we feel there's so much more for us to improve.
Yeah. How much did you have to pivot what you were working on because of the pandemic, and how much of this was stuff you were kind of already headed toward anyway, Mick?
Yeah, I think I'll quote Jack a few times in this. I think when
he's very quotable. That's okay.
He's a very quotable guy. I think the very beginning, when the COVID crisis hits, we obviously start to see this, and we already start to see it in our data, start to see this huge change that was happening with our customer base and the way that they were interacting with Clio, the work that they were doing. And I think the quotable words from Jack was, I think it's time for us to rip up our roadmap and to figure out what our customers need right now and to react to that. And that's probably the scariest thing you can hear as a product leader, is to rip up the roadmap you just finished working on and you have all your teams deployed on. But it's the right thing to do in a situation of so much change. And one of the things that I think made us able to make that change and make that change very quickly is, even though we ripped up our roadmap, our understanding of the customer, what we thought would be important, none of that changed. The only thing that changed was the timeline. Things that we thought would be important in a couple of years suddenly became important, suddenly became relevant to the majority of our customers in a short amount of time. One of my favorite examples of that is the work we were doing with Microsoft. So we've been partnering, working with Microsoft since the end of last year. And I remember when we talked about Teams at that time, it was very much an area of innovation for us. Let's go and find these few firms that are using Teams really effectively to collaborate with each other. And let's make sure that we build this great integration with Clio so that they can be effective at doing that, because we feel there's a lot of value there. And then over the course of a couple of weeks, what we thought was an area of innovation suddenly became survival. Suddenly became, this is the only way that a firm is going to communicate, because you're not going to see each other in the hallways anymore. And so we basically took those plans that kind of mapped out a couple of years in the future, and we just pulled them forwards, and because we knew that that's what our customers needed at that time. And so I think having kind of that like insights, having that knowledge, I think allowed us to be able to pivot really, really fast, and be able to deliver what our customers needed at that time of change.
Jack, during your keynote in ClioCon, you made the point that there's kind of two aspects to thinking about COVID-19 and its impact on the legal profession. One is the impact on the profession so far and on law practices so far, and the other is what it tells us about the future of legal services and how things are going to change going forward. So what about that future of legal services? And again, with kind of a focus on Clio, how do you see your company changing or evolving or adapting to help clients better address that future of legal services?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bob. And when I talked about the shift the legal industry was going through over the course of 2020, I talked about a couple of evolutionary concepts, and if there's any evolutionary biologists in your audience, they'll hopefully resonate with this metaphor. But we talked at the keynote about Darwin and the concept of the most adaptable species being the species that prevailed, and I doubled down on that with a reference to Stephen Jay Gould and his concept of punctuated equilibria, and this idea that evolution is not a process that is a smooth, gradual one that happens over millennia, but rather species tend to exist in states of relative stasis for long periods of time, and that some kind of punctuated geological event, some change in their macro and micro environment, drives very rapid periods of speciation, and that essentially new species emerge from these punctuated equilibria. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing in the legal world right now. Is COVID-19 is one of these punctuations, And we're essentially seeing speciation of law firms and lawyers in the way that they are calibrating and adapting to this new environment and the new needs of the modern legal consumer. I think we see, and we saw this very much in our legal trends report data again, but we see lawyers that have their heads in the sand, so to speak, and are hoping that if they just hold on long enough, that things will return to quote unquote normal at some point in the near future. And then we have lawyers who I think are correctly forecasting that we're never returning to normal, that we are in a period of such rapid change that we're seeing a permanent change in expectations among consumers. We're seeing a permanent change in almost realization across both lawyers and consumers what technology can do today. And we're seeing those lawyers profoundly rethink how they deliver their legal services going forward. And that's really, to your question around how does this inform Clio's take on our role in this change, is I view Clio's role as enabling that fundamental transformation of how legal services are delivered. The legal service industry, the legal industry as a whole, is the last major industry to be two things: fundamentally transformed by technology, but more importantly, to be fundamentally transformed by the internet. In January of 2020, most law firms were running in a way that was not too dissimilar to how they were running 50 or 40 or 30 years ago. And the internet, I think we all realize now, in October of 2020, enables us to do things so much better and so much differently than we were able to in the past. And I think what I've realized more than anything over the last 6 months is that although it's obviously against a backdrop of devastating human loss and economic crisis that is accompanying that human toll that COVID-19 has exacted, it has catalyzed, I think, a long overdue transformation in how lawyers embrace technology, and importantly, embrace technology not to just drive productivity improvements within their law firm, which is obviously an important thing to do, but embrace technology in a way that allows them to fundamentally rethink the way that legal services are delivered, the medium over which legal services are delivered even. And that's truly the transformational power of the internet. And I believe there's an outcome from this crisis that will allow lawyers to be happier and more fulfilled in their work, able to achieve a better blend of their work and home life needs, able to better meet the needs of their clients, and in turn create happier clients that are more satisfied with the legal services that they've received, and importantly, last but certainly not least, increase the number of people that can access those legal services. And truly, I think the long-term mission that I'm hoping to achieve here, and that I hope these technological transformations will help drive, is an increase in access to justice and help this tsunami of legal needs that is building up amidst COVID-19 to be serviced more effectively than they've ever been, thanks to a subset of lawyers that have really embraced technology and really embraced client-centered thinking to rethink how they deliver legal services at a really foundational level. And at the end of all of this, I think we'll be emerging with a legal landscape that has really bifurcated into a group of law firms and lawyers that are in this new era and this new generation of thinking and designing and delivering legal services in a completely new way, and a set of lawyers that are clinging to the status quo that will ultimately be rendered irrelevant and uncompetitive in the broader landscape.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. When you have e-payments built into your practice management software instead of as an integration, it creates a better experience for you and your clients. Streamline your payments process with Practice Panther, the all-in-one solution for your firm to access cases, clients, integrations, and payments online from anywhere. Managing your law firm is easy with Practice Panther. See for yourself on a free demo at practicepanther.com/demo. Now, let's get back to this week's interview. So, Mick, if you take what Jack just said about Clio's role as helping to enable this fundamental transformation in how legal services are delivered, how do you translate that at the product level? How do you kind of put that into practice for the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go back to quoting Jack, and this is quoting Jack quoting William Gibson. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I think we use that in the keynote as well. I think when you think about this kind of change, one of the things that is always interesting is we have existing customers, and we're very fortunate with the customers that we have at Clio. We have a whole bunch of these customers that are already living this future. They're already living post this change. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is talking to them and learning from them what works and what doesn't work. And then taking those learnings and packaging them up into products and functionality and services that we can help all of the rest of the law firms make those transitions without having to do the painful learning of lessons that some of these early adopters or some of these innovators have done. And it's such I think that's probably where I think the majority of our kind of inspiration comes from. And that's also, I think, gives us a way to experiment with new products, but also make sure that when we create guidance for our customers and we produce something new, that it's validated, that we know it's going to work as well. Like a great example of that is we launched our Google My Business integration, which were probably for some people, when they heard that announcement and they heard that we're launching that functionality, maybe seemed a little bit off, why is Clio suddenly spending time so up the funnel, talking about figuring out this one particular really, really powerful channel where legal demand is being captured and created. But it really comes from our customers. We know that the customers, some of those innovators that are extremely effective as running a cloud-based firm and making sure that firm delivers great client experiences, they are really good at managing their demand channels. And particularly one key component of that is obviously claiming your Google My Business listing, which is almost the first step on that journey. And that's, I think, almost like a perfect example of us taking something where there are some firms that are already doing things that are way more sophisticated from a marketing perspective, but we're taking those learnings, we're repackaging them in a way where now we've launched it just a couple of weeks ago, and there are hundreds of firms that have now claimed their Google My Business account and presence, and have improved the way that consumers can find them and that consumers can connect with them. And it's almost like a perfect example of us taking something, learning from some of these firms that are a little bit more in the future, and taking some of the learning and packaging up in a way that all of our other customers can take advantage of it.
Jack, in my write-up on the conference, I alluded to something you said in your closing remarks on the final day of the conference. Clio, for a couple of years now, has had this motto of wanting to transform the practice of law for good. And in referencing that motto, you said that you thought that Clio itself is becoming a movement. And I'm curious, do you think that Clio has a role in driving this transformation that's more than just the product or the technology it delivers? And if so, what is that role?
Yeah, that's a great question and observation, Bob. I think what we realized, I would say actually, almost 8 years ago or so, around the time we were planning the very first Clio Cloud conference, was a function of realizing that to achieve our mission to transform the practice of law for good, and again, our mission, when we refer to for good, there has a deliberate double meaning in that we want this to be our so-called dent in the universe, to paraphrase Steve Jobs, and we attract amazing people to Clio because they want transforming the practice of law to be their so-called dent in the universe. And they want to do that for good, and the double meaning, for good is being that permanent dent in the universe, but also the idea that we think law can be so much better. To what I mentioned earlier around making lawyers happier and more fulfilled, making their clients happier and more satisfied with the legal services they've accessed, and then to expand the scope of the legal offerings that lawyers can offer, and the impact that they can have on this massive latent legal market, the 77% of consumers that have legal needs that currently go unaddressed by lawyers, we think is a profound opportunity. And when we reflected on that mission around 8 years ago, we realized that just building a technology platform, the product side of things, it is not going to be enough to catalyze the change that we want to see in the industry. And it also didn't afford the collaborative model that we wanted to engage with the industry as a whole in imagining and reimagining what this future of legal services could look like. And that was really the thesis for the very first Clio Cloud conference was, can we get together with not just our existing customers, but also thought leaders in the industry, the people that are passionate about this idea of redefining legal service delivery, passionate about defining what the future of legal looks like, and get them in a room together. And if you got the world's smartest technologists together with that group of people, would we be able to co-create something that is really special? And I think what the last 8 years of Clio and the Clio Cloud Conference has borne out is the answer to that question is an emphatic yes. There's a huge number of lawyers that are passionate about transforming the way they do things. They want things to be better. And they want somebody to partner with and collaborate with to realize that vision. And I think the fact that we're helping spearhead this transformation that is what I would describe maybe as a technology-enabled transformation, but a transformation that is so much bigger than just technology is something that is hugely energizing to me and hugely energizing to the entire Clio team, because we see the opportunity is truly to make legal services more accessible than they've ever been, and to help make lawyers more successful than they've ever been. And those are two ideals that are not only not in opposition with one another, but actually can only be achieved by properly solving for both. And that's what has me so excited about the future. And I think that idea that this is a movement is something you feel in the energy of the audience and in the assembly of great people that Clio's been able to assemble around the conference and around the broader change that we're trying to drive in the industry.
Well, since we're all quoting you in this interview, I'll quote you one more time. You said in your keynote, "Things aren't going back to normal ever, and they shouldn't."
Right.
Mick, we are just about out of time, but do you have anything else you wanted to add to that, or is there anything else you can give us in terms of a preview of what to watch for next with Clio?
That's a tough question. Maybe just to add to, I think, what Jack just talked about. Like, I think that's the thing. The reason I'm at Clio, it's the reason everybody at Clio works for Clio, and why we like these events like the Clio Cloud Conference so much. It's feeling that we're part of this, like being part of this mission, and then being part of this greater community, and these events, I think, like punctuate that or make that really, really clear to us, which is incredibly energizing. And I almost feel like if you want to know what our roadmap is, you should read the Legal Trends report, and you should and even like for if you I think at the Clio Cloud Conference we did a good job of surfacing people like Erin Levine and Stanley Tate and all of these others that are doing some incredibly innovative things in their practices. And more so than trying to kind of maybe conjecture what we'll be launching in the next couple of months. I think if I do anything is direct people to those people and try to learn from them and figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And you'll see that a lot of what we're going to be doing at Clio is gonna enable that and make that even easier.
Well, Jack and Mick, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Bob. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much, Bob. This was great.
Well, that does it for today's show. Thanks again to Jack Newton and Mick Lernout for taking the time out of their busy schedules to be with us. Thanks to Ben Ambrogi and his company Populous Radio for producing and editing today's show. And thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, this is Bob Ambrogi.